Hi there, I'm Rod Bergeron, and welcome back to another quick and easy watercolor painting. I've had some questions lately about, about my setup, but mostly about how much water I use. You see, I had that 3/4 inch brush full of water, and I wet that whole top from this half down to 2/3 here. And I'm gonna pick up some blue that I already had prepared, and I'm just going to put those couple of streaks across there. So I really haven't added any more water than just that that little bit of wash in the blue and that water that I had at the beginning. And now I'm going to add some, this is Payne's gray. Okay, so we're going to add some Payne's gray into this, add some Payne's gray here. And all I'm really hoping for with the Payne's gray is that it sort of gets picked up by the water that's already on the page, and it sort of gets pushed up into, it becomes background, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, I put a little bit of this Payne's gray wash across here. The one other thing that you'll notice about my work lots of times is I don't put a lot more water into the system, but I do put a lot more pigment into the system. So I'm going to pick up some more Payne's gray here and some more Payne's gray here. And again, my hope is that this all gets picked up by the water that's already on there and gets sucked back into, the existing water that's already on there. And it becomes this very hazy background. So I'm going to set that brush down, and I'm going to pick up this, which is my #1 watercolor brush, and I've sharpened the one end of it with a utility knife. And I'm just going to draw out of these dark areas here, and I'm just going to make some tree branches. Down here I'm going to draw out some of this, some of these dark areas. And again, we're trying to add some we're trying to add some strokes that are looking like some branches, and that's all we're really going for there. I'm going to take this brush, and I just rinsed it out. I'm going to pick up some yellow ochre fairly intensely, and I'm going to drop some of this yellow ochre just into a few of those wet areas that are already wet there, and I'm going to allow that to carry that, allow that wetness to carry that yellow ochre to wherever it is that it wants to go. And I'm trying to keep this very loose and very free. I'm going to pick up some of this, which is sienna, and I'm going to drop that into a few places there as well. Okay, so I'm going to pick up this sienna a little bit more intensely. Just pick it up a little bit more intensely still. And I'm going to go back to my #1 watercolor brush that I've sharpened the end off. You see all that white area right there? I think that's going to turn out to be quite spectacular. I'm going to draw into here a little bit more. Let's get a little bit more brush going on there. Okay, so we need to fill this area in right here, and I'm going to use yellow ochre today to fill that in. And we want to go from one side all the way over to the other with one stroke. All right, so that's why I use the bigger brush. So we're going to try to fill this up in one stroke, go from one side to the other. Okay, so here we go. And I missed a little bit there. That's okay. I'm going to pick up a little bit more here. And we're just going to touch that along there. See how that started to bleed down into there, and this is starting to bleed up into there. That's exactly what we're going for. All right, I'm not going to rinse this brush out again. I'm going to take this yellow ochre. I'm going to touch this in a few places. And we're not going to do any more than that to it. I'm going to pick up some sienna. Pick up some sienna, a little bit more sienna. And then I'm going to take my brush again, and I'm going to drag out of some of those areas to create a little bit more brush. Nice, that's turned out all right. Okay, so I want a little bit more darkness in this. I'm going to rinse that brush out, knock most of the water off of it, and I'm going to pick up some more Payne's Gray right on the right off the palette, and I'm going to touch this just in a few places. Okay, just a few places, and let that again go to wherever it is that we're doing. So what we're doing here is we're building up layers. Okay, we've put in many different colors, and then we've gone back and we've scribed out of those colors. Okay, and so we're adding layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. The last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to take that brush and I'm going to knock most of the water off it. I'm going to pick up some blue, and I'm just going to touch a few places with some blue, and we're just going to let that get carried by the water to wherever it is it's going to go to. I'm not going to try to influence it too much. I have here my little bag of salt, and I'm just going to take a couple of grains of salt, introduce it into the tops of these trees, and maybe a couple of places across the bottom here. And just a few grains of salt. All right, we're not going to go too crazy with the salt, and we're just going to let this air dry. Doesn't make any difference if it takes 10 minutes or 2 hours. Don't try to touch it. Don't try to influence it. Let's just let it dry and see what happens to it. All right, let's have a look at this and see what we got. Look at this salt has done to this. Salt just does magic in watercolor. It just does some crazy stuff. Look at this blue where I dropped this blue in. You would think that that would not work, but for some reason it just works. And where this darkness is near this light, you know, if you want to make something look really, really light, you put something dark beside it. And if you want to make something look really, really dark, you put something light beside it, you know, vice versa. I don't know if I said that right or not, but I think you get what I'm talking about. And down here, this blue here, and the way the salt has come out of there, this salt is still really stuck on there. All right, what happens when we put our mat on it? All right, that's pretty cool. That's pretty good. Yeah, look at these white areas. We include these white areas. Look at these little white patches across here. It really looks like a hill going up here, and then it sort of plateaus across there. All right, that turned out pretty good, I think. All right, as always, if you're currently a subscriber, thanks a lot. And if you're not currently a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love to know where you're from. If you could drop me a comment and let me know where you're from, I'd really appreciate it. I wanted to show you some of my setup here before we go too far. This is my 3/4 inch flat watercolor brush, and I think you've seen that a million times. This is the water container that I work out of most of the time. It's just an old peanut butter container. And I'm going to get that painting out of the way so I don't wreck it. But this is my palette. You'll see, you know, these are the colors that I work out of most of the time. This is my Payne's Gray, which just, so these are called half pans if you're interested. And my paint are all Sennelier. This is my lemon yellow, sap green, ultramarine deep, yellow ochre, sienna. These are other colors. This is black. I don't really use that very often. This is a red. I like to highlight stuff with. These are blues that I sometimes use, but yeah, this is the little palette that I use most of the time. And that's about it. I mean, the only other thing that I would say I use quite often is, you know, I like to use Sharpie Pen. And it's got to say pen on it, all right? So Sharpie Pen, that's my #1 watercolor brush that I almost never use, but I have sharpened I've sharpened the one end of it here. This is a 1/4 inch Windsor Newton flat brush. And that's about it. I mean, the only other brush that I really use quite often is this is a number 4 round. But that's really it. It's pretty limited. You know, I have masking tape for taping my stuff down, and you know, this board that you've seen a million times is just a little piece of plywood that I use to film with. That's about it. If you have any questions or comments about any of the stuff that I use, I'd love to hear from you. You know, drop me a message, and thanks a lot for watching. See you again real soon.